Imagine a smell so thick you can taste it, a cloying, greasy sweetness that coats the back of your throat. It's the scent of 30,000 pounds of death rotting in the summer sun. A fin whale has beached, and for a Viking village, this isn't a tragedy, it's a lottery win. But claiming the prize is a blood sport. According to Norse law, the drift rights belong to whoever strikes the first blow. So, when that stench hits the village, men don't walk. They sprint. They race across the sand with axes raised, lungs burning, desperate to sink iron into the carcass before a rival clan or the tide steals it away. But this race has a deadly finish line. Not every whale is a gift from the gods. Some are biological time bombs. Before a single cut is made, the village elder performs a grim diagnostic. He drives a spear into the whale's eye. If clear fluid runs, the meat is safe. If yellow pus erupts, the animal died of disease. To touch it is to risk a slow, agonizing death, as bacteria eat your flesh from the outside in. Yet, hunger makes men reckless. Many ignored the warning pus, carving into the poisoned blubber only to watch their hands turn black with gangrene weeks later. The risk was calculated against the reward. 40,000 daily calories sitting on the sand, enough energy to power a warband for a month. But owning the whale was the easy part. The real nightmare began when the knives came out, and the clock started ticking on 48 hours of grueling, nauseating labor. The carcass is a mountain of flesh, 50 feet long and slick with slime. The blubber alone can be 15 inches thick, a wall of dense, rubbery fat that dulls iron blades in minutes. This isn't butchery, it's excavation. Teams of 6 men work in a frenzy, wielding flensing knives, curved blades designed to peel the fat like an orange rind. They are literally standing inside the whale, boots slipping on entrails, hacking out slabs that weigh as much as a grown man. It is a scene of organized chaos, where a slip could mean a severed toe or a crushed leg. But the true enemy is the heat. In the short Nordic summer, the sun turns the beach into an incubator for maggots. By hour 20, the carcass begins to liquefy. The fat oozes a rancid yellow oil that blisters bare skin. The smell becomes a physical force, gagging even the hardest sailors. They tie wool soaked in birch tar over their faces, breathing through the potent pine scent just to keep from vomiting. They work through the night, lit by flickering torches, their shadows dancing on the ribs of the Leviathan. If they stop, they starve. Losing half the meat to rot means half the village goes hungry in January. So they cut until their muscles scream, racing the inevitable decay. But what do you do with 10 tons of fat before it goes rancid? You boil it, just past the dunes. The beach transforms into an industrial processing plant. Huge iron cauldrons, some wide enough to bathe in, are balanced over roaring fires. This is the rendering line. Women and children haul the slabs of blubber, dumping them into the pots where they boil down into liquid gold, whale oil. This wasn't just fuel, it was currency. Whale oil lit the lamps during the endless winter nights, waterproofed the leather boots of raiders, and sealed the hulls of longships. But the rendering pits were dangerous. As the oil reached its boiling point, it became volatile. A sudden splash could melt skin off the bone. A shift in the wind could blow embers into the vats, turning the entire beach into a raging inferno. Villagers stood ready with barrels of sand and seawater, fighting fires while skimming the precious oil. It was hot, stinking, terrifying work that lasted for days. Yet, when the smoke cleared and the oil was barreled, the Vikings looked at the stripped skeleton and saw opportunity. The meat was gone. The fat was rendered. But the bones? The bones were the steel of the North. To a Viking, a whale rib wasn't waste. It was a construction beam. In a land where trees were scarce or stunted, whalebone became the framework of life. Using massive iron saws, they cut the vertebrae and ribs into manageable lumber. The sound of sawing bone, a high-pitched screech filled the air, mixing with the smell of burnt marrow. These bones were so valuable that archaeologists have found them traded over 1,200 miles away, deep in the heart of Russia. They built houses with them, using the curved jawbones as archways and ribs as rafters. They carved the dense bone into weaving tablets, sled runners, and ornate combs that became status symbols for the elite. A Viking warrior might carry a sword of iron, but he combed his beard with the bones of a monster. Every scrap was utilized, turning the giant of the deep into the tools of daily life. But there was still a problem. Not all the meat could be eaten fresh or dried. Some of it was already turning, tainted by the delay. Most cultures would throw it away. The Vikings, they buried it and waited for it to become a delicacy. This is where Viking survivalism crosses the line into madness for the modern mind. They took the questionable meat, the chunks that were gray and slick, and threw them into a pit lined with birch bark and stones. They called it hockerel, but you might call it controlled rotting. By burying the meat and pressing it under heavy rocks, they squeezed out the fluids and created an anaerobic environment. Down in the dark earth, bacteria went to work. They fermented the flesh, producing ammonia and acids that acted as preservatives. It was a chemical gamble. If the wrong bacteria took hold, the meat became a botulism bomb, capable of paralyzing a family at dinner. But if it worked, the result was a rubbery, pungent, cheese-like substance that could last for years. When they dug it up months later, the smell was enough to make eyes water, a mix of urine and old fish. But to a Viking facing a blizzard, that reek was the smell of salvation. It was pure protein, pre-digested by bacteria, ready to fuel a body against the cold. The final harvest from the whale was its skin. Unlike the thin hide of a cow, whale skin is armor. Stripping it required brute force and winches, peeling off sheets that weighed 500 pounds. Once removed, it was soaked in brine and stretched on massive wooden frames to dry. This process took weeks and required constant scraping to remove the last vestiges of fat. The result was a leather so thick and tough it could turn a sword blade. Vikings used it to make ship ropes that wouldn't rot in salt water, and soles for shoes that could walk on ice without wearing through. Some sagas even whisper of shields faced with whale hide, prized for being fireproof and nearly indestructible. It was the Kevlar of the Dark Ages. But working with it was a nightmare. The salt stung cuts, the smell clung to hair and clothes for months, and the sheer weight of the wet hide could crush a man. Yet, they did it, because in the north, you waste nothing. The butchering of a whale wasn't just a chore, it was a microcosm of Viking life. It required speed, violence, community cooperation, and a stomach of iron. It turned a village into a factory and a carcass into a lifeline. Every drop of oil, every splinter of bone, and every strip of rotten meat was a victory against the inevitable winter starvation. They survived because they were willing to do the work that others couldn't stomach. They found value in the rot and resources in the refuse. It was this ruthless efficiency that allowed them to launch their ships and conquer the world. But surviving the hunger was only half the battle. Once the bellies were full, the real enemy arrived, the cold that could freeze a man's blood in his veins. The Viking ability to turn a rotting behemoth into food, fuel, and tools is a testament to human ingenuity. It forces us to ask, what would we be willing to do to survive? Would we eat the fermented flesh? Would we wear the skin of a monster? For the Vikings, the answer was simple: yes, because the alternative was death. If you think the diet of the North was intense, wait until you see how they engineered their homes to survive temperatures that would kill a modern man in minutes. Hit that subscribe button and click the next video to step inside the frozen longhouse. You won't believe how hot it could get under the snow.